Sorry about that. I don't know. I think that's just sitting there.
Yeah, let's just see if somebody comes, and if they do, we'll get the actual place, but if not, then.
Do you come in the mornings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I try and do date night on Sundays, so even though I would like to come in the evening,
Right.
I also want to stay early.
It's important. Yeah, I wanted to come in the morning. Also, I feel like it's a totally different group.
Yeah. Yeah, is it more like other people come in the evening?
No, I love that.
I always like what I was thinking.
I always thought that you.
You don't think it's, I mean, there are like, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, yeah, I guess I'm not an early riser, but maybe those are the early risers in the morning.
Yeah. So like not the younger. Sleeping in.
I know younger people who are early risers.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess by younger people, I mean people in their late 20s and 30s.
Right.
And early 30s, but.
Yeah. And who is Mama Michael always run the mornings?
Only I think only twice a month.
Okay. Because I've only been here, he's done it once a night. Is it typical?
I think it's like the last Sunday of the month, no, Sunday of the month.
Okay.
Because I like to do the, when I can, do the all day sits on the first again. But I do it long. So.
It's kind of like sit.
Mm-hmm. Good sit,
Or sit.
Did everyone get copies of both of these? Friends and you.
More than one was sent out online.
We didn't send this out.
Welcome, everybody. You look so happy to be here. That's cool. Great that you've chosen to do this on a Saturday instead of spending time some other way. Can you hear in the back? Okay. Especially welcome to new people or anyone who's been here only 1 or 2 times. We say that, and then I think we should really be especially welcoming people who've been here hundreds of times, because some of you have hundreds of times. So you know, the fact that you chose this already means that you've got some sense of these teachings. Otherwise, you would have went out to a nice breakfast and, watch a matinee and
Slept until 10.
yeah, whatever. There's billions of things we can do, endless. But here we are. So, welcome to the people watching on streaming, and thanks to those who make that possible. So I want us, I come and I sit quiet because I'm so nervous that I have to wait till my heart's not pounding and then I can talk. But let's sit again quietly for a few minutes, and I'll help us think of a motivation partly from the Karmapa related to these verses. So it's good to check out your body, check in with your body. Bodies have moods. Check in with the mood of your body today with no judgment, just noticing gently, compassionately. And one way to do this is to notice the edges of your body, where your body ends and space around you begins. Just notice that. There's a certain area that the body occupies. And see if you can notice within that area, in a kind of a calm way, the myriad of sensations that are going on in that area of the body. Again, with no judgment, like good sensation, bad sensation, just noticing. And when we do that, we can also notice that the area of the body is completely interdependent with the space around it, with the ground you sit on, whether that's a chair or a cushion. and that the breath comes and goes, drawing in the space and then taking it in and letting it go. Just notice that process. These teachings that we're going to think about, meditate on today, are Mahayana teachings. Maha meaning great, and Yana meaning a wheel or path, a vehicle, actually, a great vehicle. And the Karmapa, talking about these 8 verses, said, in the Mahayana, we take greater responsibility for others than on the lower vehicles. And we need to take that responsibility not with our mouths and prayers only, though those are helpful, but we take it in our heart. The Mahayana is based on all the common practices, and we'll start with those today, what those mean. So-called lower practices, which most of us have not accomplished yet, the so-called Hinayana, fundamental. And the Karmapa says when we finally accomplish those foundational practices, then we actually reach in our heart the Mahayana level. He said the 8 verses appear to be a Mahayana text, but is it? And his answer is, well, it depends on your intention. To be an authentic Mahayana Dharma, you have to look at your own motivation, not at the text. I'll say that again. Whether or not this is the Mahayana text will depend on your intention. To be an authentic Mahayana Dharma, you must point to your own motivation, not the text. In other words, these are not so much something you study, but that you practice. That's the point of mind training. He goes on and says, the question in mind training is, can I pacify my own wild mind? Can I pacify my own wild mind in order to help others? And we will never know this unless we focus inside ourselves honestly. So take another couple minutes contemplating those words, asking yourself that question. Setting that intention so that this is an authentic Mahayana study and meditation today. And setting the intention deeply in your heart in order to help everyone here in this room, first of all, and then spreading out to limitless beings. Okay, next, let's take refuge. Very important. So, does everyone have the refuge prayer? Okay. We will recite this all the way through where it says concluding prayers. Together. Until I awaken, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. Until I awaken, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. Until I awaken, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sacred happiness which is free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, impartial, free of attachment and aversion. While the nature of beings has always been full enlightenment, not realizing this, they wander in endless samsara. For the boundless suffering of sentient beings, may overwhelming compassion be born in my being. While such compassion is active and immediate, in the moment of compassion its essential emptiness is nakedly clear. This conjunction is the undeviating supreme path. Inseparable from it may I meditate day and night. The spirit of awakening is precious. May it arise in whom it has not arisen. Once arisen, may it not diminish, but ever increase and flourish. So, in the motivation that Karmapa was talking about, the fundamental path, it's got so many synonyms: the fundamental path, the Hinayana path, the Theravada path, the lower path. And sometimes there seems to be a tendency in those of us who either start with Mahayana or Vajrayana to be judgmental about it, like it is lower, that lower word. But it's a complete path also. And fully awakened beings result from that path. And it's very difficult to accomplish those so-called lower path teachings. So we, at least when I teach, and my teachers who I've observed teach, they generally start with the teachings of the lower path for the reason that the Mahayana rests on those, the Vajrayana rests on those. The Vajrayana includes all of them. We here call it the three turnings, right? So we'll call it the first turning, okay? That's just another language for it. So we start with first turning teaching so that we're not building a sand castle here, so that we're putting something on a firm foundation, okay? So what's the foundation? Well, we talk about it here sometimes as the four thoughts that turn the mind. So people who are familiar with our practice have those down. And they're not listed in the handout, or are they? I can't remember what I put in there. But I'm not going to approach it so much through those this morning, but I'll list them. Okay, so the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. Oh, maybe someone else would like to list them. Who can just rattle those off nicely? 4 thoughts, not the 4 noble truths. Alan.
Precious human existence, death and impermanence, karma, and the pitfalls of samsara.
Yay. So everybody heard them? I'll say them again. So, precious human life. That's our current condition. We don't always feel that way, right? But that's why we need to meditate on that, to see our excellent conditions. Second, death and impermanence. No more need be said. We're all going to die. No one will get out of here alive. I always laugh about that in the movies when some killer comes in and says, no one's getting out of here alive. It's like, yeah.
Duh.
And the third one, karma. Yeah, actions, thoughts, words lead to results. And the faults of samsara, or the pitfalls of samsara, that's just our constant suffering. We grab at what causes suffering. We push away things, and we grab at things, and that's the constant suffering. But I want to approach it through, so it's completely complementary to the 4 noble truths, okay? So the Buddha, in the sutra, it says, the Buddha said about his own teaching, I teach 2 things. I like to remember this. If you don't memorize anything else, you can memorize this. By the way, memorizing is terrific. The Catholic nuns were right. It's really good to memorize some short text, like these 8 verses, that's short. Or memorize the 4 noble truths, or memorize the 4 thoughts, because then they're in your head to be used at odd times of the day. And all times are odd. So, but here we go. The Buddha said, I teach 2 things. I teach about suffering, and I teach about the end of suffering. Period. Everything falls into this. Everything you study in the Dharma will fall into one of those 2 categories. Now, I was thinking about this, and I thought, you know what I don't like about that is they both say suffering. And I think it's part of why people have this, Buddhism has this reputation, like it's all about suffering. Suffering, the end of suffering. So I was thinking, well, we could say, I teach, the Buddha teaches 2 things, suffering and unbounded joy, or unbounded peace, because that's the end of suffering, okay? But that kind of hints at the 3rd turning. So if we're staying in the 1st turning, we'll just say suffering and the end of suffering. It's pretty important to think about the end of suffering. We think about suffering quite a bit, but you know, there is an end of suffering to be had, and there is a path to do that, and we're on it. How do we know we're on it? You're here. People who are here are on this path. And other people are too. But. Okay. Now, regarding suffering, we often then talk right away about the 3 types. So I'll just review them quickly too, because I'm not, I want to focus on 2 other things about suffering. The first one is the suffering of ouch. Even animals know that. You know, you light a match near an ant and they'll run away. You know, everyone knows the suffering of ouch. It's physical, it can be mental, but it's not complex. That's the thing we mostly think of when we think of suffering. And one of my teachers insists on not saying the word suffering for that reason and calling it dukkha, which is a more comprehensive, it's Sanskrit, isn't it? Yeah, more comprehensive Sanskrit term that includes many of English synonyms: stress, suffering, constant turmoil. You know, it's
Discontent.
just bigger, you know. So, but the ouch kind of suffering. The second kind of suffering is what we call pleasure. It's like a koan. The second kind of suffering is what we call pleasure. Why is it suffering? Because the moment it arises, we're projecting onto it far more than it contains. We start grasping, and immediately we're missing the true joy. Because it's like, I take my first bite of ice cream, and I'm like, oh man, I just want that to last. Okay, there's the suffering. It's not going to last. It's going like this. So the suffering of change is what we call pleasure. It's that we load it up with too much and we grasp at it. Okay. And the third type of suffering is what's called the all-pervasive suffering. That just means, one teacher says, this, being in this, which has uncontrolled aging, uncontrolled sickness, uncontrolled death. Can you stop your aging? No. Your death? No. Next time you get sick? No. It's the all-pervasive suffering. Now I'm just talking about this physical one, but the all-pervasive suffering mentally. We don't see reality as it is. We live in our karmic bubble and interpret everything. And we can see even on a very gross level during the day, you're talking to your partner or you're talking to your friend or a stranger, and you're just sure about your point of view. It seems so clear and so right, and you're not even being mean or controlling. And no, that's not their point of view at all. You know, that's just the grossest kind of thing. Like, I think it's red and you call it maroon. Well, you're wrong. But that, you know, that's teeny. On a deeper level, what that suffering is about is just not understanding at all the situation we're in. It's that we don't understand suffering, and we don't understand a path out of it, and we don't understand our Buddha nature, even though it's indelible, inherent right there. We don't know it. That makes sense? Does everybody have this experience? Am I describing something very weird? I'm seeing some recognition. Okay.
It sounds kind of like, I don't know, like, I guess, like, the suffering of just not getting it.
Yeah, that would be a nice shorthand. Not getting it in every single way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which is the pervasive part.
That's the pervasive part. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so those are the three types of suffering, okay? And then I wanted to do two things more about suffering. Like, oh, well, I won't say that. Okay. One of the ways in that I memorized after I met a teacher, it comes out of the Lam Rim in the Gelug tradition. The Lam Rim is the stages of the path to awakening from the very first kind of, it includes all three turnings. And it's like 20, I never memorized the number, 24 topics, and you meditate on them over and over. One of those topics is the 6 sufferings of those in the human realm. So we're in the human realm, okay? So those 6 sufferings, see if they match your experience. First, everything is uncertain. Seems like some things are certain, but earthquake could happen right now. You know, you could get sick right now. My friend's mother stood up from a nice conversation, aneurysm in the brain went off, fell down, died. We have a lot of uncertainty, right? We don't know who's going to be the leader of a country. Very uncertain. Big change. We don't know, I mean, I won't even list them, but you get the idea, right? And this is our lives. But we fool ourselves, like, no, I know I'm going to get through this teaching today. We're going to have some lunch. We're going to end at 3. Then I'm going to go, you have your plan. You're going to go play soccer or sit in a hot tub or something. And I have my plan. We don't know if we're going to reach that. The truth, but we can't stand to live in uncertainty. We just can't stand it. So we make our agendas. Then we see what happens. So that's the first one, uncertainty. The second one I've already touched on with that second type of suffering, the suffering of change, is the dissatisfaction. Everything's kind of not quite it, We're sitting here, this is wonderful, but I would really like to make some adjustments. And wouldn't you? Like, I want to get a different chair. I want to be more rested. That's the one I would make right now. I want to be more rested. Wish I hadn't played with the grandkids yesterday. It was a great distraction, but too tired. We all have our little adjustments that we want to make. Even in this perfect moment, right? I wish my hair looked better, or, you have yours, right? So there's that constant dissatisfaction. That's the second one of the 6 suffering. The third one is, now this plunges us into the Buddhist worldview, but that's what we're here studying, right? We are born over and over and over again. We have had endless bodies. Geshe Zopa says, if you piled them all up, your bones would be higher than Mount Meru, which is a mythical mountain in Tibetan Buddhism, which is just gigantic. But you could say they would fill all of space. Amazing, huh? That's the Buddhist worldview. Born over and over and over again, every time born out of attachment, and every time born out of ignorance, and every time born out of aversion. So we were afraid of something, headed towards something, grabbing something, pushing something, not knowing, come out of the bardo, grab another body. Who was telling me this amazing story? Oh, I know. Yeah, I won't do that one. I have too many things in my head, so I have to chop them. Okay, where are we? We're on the third of the 6 sufferings of the human realm. Uncertain, unsatisfactory, born over and over. Fourth one is die over and over. Because if you're born, you're guaranteed to die. Comes with it. Lama Michael once said something I found quite interesting to meditate on. Maybe we should be celebrating death, not birth. We get all happy when someone's born, and we kind of don't realize, think about, wow, they're born into a suffering realm. What's this baby going to go through? I mean, I look at my little grandsons, 2, 3, and 4, think, God, are they going to have an atmosphere? Are they going to have water? I mean, these are important questions. 20 years, they're going to be 22 years old. What's this place going to look like? So, while we can be happy at the fact that they're in a human realm, hopefully they'll find some meaningful spiritual path. That's the only real meaning of being here. And I include in that common kindness, whatever. It doesn't have to be formal, but secular good values. Hopefully they'll find that, because that's all that goes forward is the consciousness. Body, just fertilizer. They say you're carrying your corpse right with you right now. You don't have to go looking for it. So, okay. So let's see, where are we? Oh, we're dying over and over. It's good I have my blueprint. Okay, and then the fourth one, while we're alive, and even next life, past life, we go up. We go down, uncontrolled, up, down. I get a great job. I'm talking true life here. And with the best salary I ever had, great benefits, and an important job where I had some fame. And I was so attached to getting that, and it was so miserable. In 5.5 years, I left. So you see, you don't know what's coming. Up, down, new car, someone keys it in the parking lot, and you're not happy, you know. Your wonderful child is born, but they've got some kind of birth defect, you know. This is just how we go, up, down, uncontrolled, you know. That's not a surprise, right? Is anybody surprised? No more need be said. Okay, and then the other one, oh, I don't like this one. I really didn't like this 6th one when I hit it. We do all of this alone. And I argued with this right away in my mind. No, when I die, my friends will be there with me. You know, well, maybe. I might die on the highway with a state patrol person there in an ambulance on the way. Of course, they'll be kind to us, they can be, but you don't know. And what it means, of course, you've already caught it, is it means really you have to do your death process alone. They can't, no one can come with you. You know, only thoughts will go forward, only habits of mind will go forward. The consciousness is immaterial, that's what goes forward. There's no one who can get in there with you and come, in a way. You know, I hope I take my teachers with me. But, you know, only that all they can take is what they taught, right? And only if I've practiced it. So we die alone, we're born alone, we're going up and down alone. When I had that wonderful job turned terrible, I was married, my husband was so empathetic, but he wasn't there, you know, the 8 hours a day of difficult staff and program and stuff. So you're always doing this alone.
I always think of it as there's no one in here with us except, I mean, no one can join me in here.
Yeah, and even you're not in there. Yeah, it's kind of scary. But yeah, that's why we have to develop the consciousness. Body's less important, but they're connected, so we take good care of our bodies. Don't, you know, the Buddha showed, don't go all ascetic, don't go all pleasure. That was what his life was showing us. Let me stop and see if there's some comments or questions.
Good. I'm a little fuzzy on number 5, like sort of kind of like looking for a way to kind of get a one-word definition out of that.
Up and down.
That helps.
Going up and down.
Volatility?
Oh, you want one word. Well, it's kind of connected to the uncertainty. What would be one word of going up and down?
Variable.
Variable.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Also,
Any other?
undependable.
Undependable.
That's even better.
Unreliable.
I
Yeah.
like that too.
Unstable.
Unstable. There you go. Yeah. Okay. Other.
But it definitely has to do with that sense of the peaks and the valleys.
Yeah. Heaven and hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't control it, no matter how hard you try. It just goes up and goes down, whether or not I like it.
Isn't that bad, Bob?
It
He said
is.
whether or not I like it.
And yes, especially when I made a decision to let go of my suffering, but the more I attach to controlling the uncontrollable, the more suffering I seem to experience.
Yes, that's the key. That's what we study is don't try to do what you can't do. We suffer so much from trying to do what we can't do. So my notes tell me to read this now. I don't know where I'm at sometimes without this blueprint. This comes from an amazing classic text, Words of My Perfect Teacher, by Patro Rinpoche. And Patro Rinpoche was such a renowned, beloved odd, eccentric teacher in the Tibetan tradition that all four Tibetan lineages will come here. And Patro Rinpoche here was not the perfect teacher. He gathered the teachings of his perfect teacher, Jigme somebody. I don't memorize
Is it
all the
Lingpa?
names. And I don't mean any disrespect, but I just, I don't know Tibetan. So, talking about suffering, he said, oh, it's about the impermanence. Okay, let me check this little thing here. Oh, yeah. Okay, part of the suffering, the death and impermanence. Okay. And you know how much Tibetans say meditate on death, meditate on death, meditate on death? It's really important every day to meditate on your death. If you don't do that, you won't really be living very well, because you won't appreciate the beauty and shortness of this precious time. And you won't really have a deep sense of the suffering of self and others. So, for example, sometimes when I'm really irritated with someone, or I just don't like what they're doing, if I can think, because they're not doing what I know is right, I can think, that one too will die. Compassion just kind of rises out of that. It's like, really, Zopa, do you want to pick at this little situation? You're both in a canoe going over the waterfall, and who knows what your mind or their mind will be doing at that moment. So really, do I want to pick this little pissy fight? It puts things in perspective over and over. So Patro Rinpoche's teacher is saying, in essence, this conjunction of body and mind, we have this conjunction right now, this present one, is impermanent. So do not count on it as your own. It is only on loan. And so that hints also at the bodhicitta. It is on loan. One of the things bodhisattvas do is they give away their body over and over in a prayer, or in certain practices. You say, I give my body to my friends, meaning I'll use it for my friends, I'll use it for my family, I'll use it for strangers, I'll give it to my enemy, I'll give it to the scariest beings there are. There's a chip practice, you chop it up and feed it to scary demons. All of that is about letting go and realizing it's not yours. How could it be yours? Who's you? Who's you that owns it? If you're the owner of it, why can't you stop your aging and your sickness and your death? Who's this big owner that's in charge? Nada. So once you take a bodhisattva vow, you're saying, I'm using this, for it belongs to you. Now I don't realize this, right? Already inside I'm saying, no, it's mine. But this is the bodhisattva, we can aspire to that, to always be giving. Then when we do that, we end up like these folks. The Dalai Lama, the Karmapa, beings that do give every moment. They know it's not theirs. They know it's on loan. And we are so drawn to their compassion and wisdom. They're in line with reality. I'm not. I think it's mine. I think I own it. I think I have a personal protection area. My country of Zopa. Don't come in here. I will do war on you if you do. This is what we do, right? And then we extrapolate that and go go to war for real big, you know. It's the same mind. Okay. All right, so now those sufferings are important to remember, and that's kind of what I'm going to say about the teaching on suffering. And the path out, the end of suffering. This points towards this thing that I feel, well, that is impossible to talk about, okay? Buddha nature. Buddha nature. It's impossible to describe because it happens to be beyond all concept. It is only known experientially, truly known experientially. But we talk about it, and books get written about it, and this is what we do. Why? Because we're stuck in a conceptual, non-experiential way, reaching for it, you know. It's like we aren't on the moon. We can just look at a teacher pointing the finger at the moon and look at the moon, but we're not on it experiencing it. That's okay. That's where we are. But so all these words that we're going to say here, a few, are not going to be it, okay? And one of the best ways to get tricked towards it is the aspiration for Mahamudra prayer that we often read here at the end of Chenrezig, all-day Chenrezig. But I'll still say a few things, okay? So some synonyms for this ultimate nature, this Buddha nature, the result of the end of suffering, okay? It's the ultimate nature, the true nature. It's unbounded, unfettered. I like that. No fetters. No, fetters are like what holds you back. Unfettered, non-dual. What the heck would that mean? We live in such a dualistic world. It would be really good to just ponder what's non-dual. Pure clarity and awareness. And I'll read one thing out of the aspiration for Mahamudra on this. And why I'm reading this is A, it's the second part of what the Buddha said he taught, but B, as we're going to go through the 8 verses of thought transformation, and I have a plan, an experiment I hope will work, that we get to go through them 3 different times today with 3 different ways of approaching them. So don't worry, we're going to get there. But from the aspiration for Mahamudra on the ultimate, all dharmas are projections of the mind. Now this does not mean dharma teachings with a capital D. It's a small d, and you'll run into this over and over in Buddhist study. This means phenomena. Small d dharmas are just phenomena, all phenomena. So it could say all phenomena. All dharmas are projections of the mind. As for mind, there is no mind. Mind's nature is empty. Empty and immediate. Just look at that. Empty and immediate. How could something be empty and immediate? Just a total puzzle, right? Be puzzled. If you're not puzzled, you're projecting something that's not there. We should sit in a puzzlement about this. As for mind, there is no mind. Mind's nature is empty. Empty and immediate, mind appears as everything. Investigating it well, may I settle the basic points. Appearances, that means right now. You're looking here, you could look anywhere, I'm looking out. You're all appearances. which never existed in themselves, have been confused as objects. So I look out, I see an appearance. I think you're an object. I don't think you never existed in yourself. This is the same Alan and Matthew and Miriam that I saw last week, right? You haven't changed one bit. That's how I approach it. I will act in pattern with you based on that. Isn't that crazy? And you've totally changed. It's bizarre. Okay. Appearances which never existed in themselves have been confused as objects. So I confuse you as an object, you confuse me as an object. Awareness itself, because of ignorance, has been confused as a self. So I confuse my awareness as though there's self here rather than just awareness. No, there's a self here, named Zopa, made up of body and Zopa history and all that, right? Very solid. Through the power of dualistic fixation, I wander in the realm of existence. May ignorance and confusion be completely resolved. So this is just touching on the poetry and the kind of pointing toward the ultimate, the way things truly exist. Appearance, emptiness, non-dual. If I could push my hands right into each other. Non-dual. The appearance is never there without the emptiness of the appearance. Okay? It doesn't exist, even Buddhists do not see it. It doesn't not exist. It's the origin of samsara and nirvana. No contradiction, conjunction, the middle way. If one says it is this, nothing has been posited. If one says it is not this, nothing has been denied. Unconditioned pure being. The ultimate unconditioned pure being transcends intellect. So we can only use our intellect to go so far. I always thought it was going to take me all the way. You know, especially once you go through law school, you're positive of that. And that's a problem. Okay? Not realizing this one circles in the ocean of samsara. Realizing it, Buddha isn't anywhere else. So if you don't have this aspiration for Mahamudra, it's in a white box on that shelf behind that part of the wall. And you can take some home and you can meditate on this till you're fully awakened. And it might speed that. Okay, so I just touch on that because you can see the words even are so kind of magical, like what universe am I in? You know, and that's just a small part of it. You start reading it over and over and it sort of tricks you into, I'm completely confused. Confusion's good. It's the beginning of awakening. Why? Because we're so darn certain right now in our ignorance. We have a stubborn kind of ignorance. I'm sure I know how this works. I'm positive of it. That's a pride that's not helpful. It's pride in our ignorance. I'm totally ignorant and I'm proud of it. You know? Okay, enough said. Let me see if I want to read this next thing. Okay, I want to read this one quote that I put in the, it's by Ringu Toku, our dear teacher who was here this last fall. And it's from his book called Mind Training, for sale right there. And I had put it in the announcement, but I just like it so much because it now, as we move into the 8 verses, it orients us. The 8 verses are a part of what's called Lojong in Tibetan Buddhism. Lojong means training the mind. Okay? And he says, Lojong, mind training, helps us to come to terms with every illusion. So we were just talking about the illusions that we operate in, and every concept, all the mistaken ideas we have about our own nature and reality. I love this next line. there is actually no difference between one illusion and another. We make huge differences. I like that illusion. I don't like that illusion. I don't care about that illusion. I'll kill for that illusion. You know, I'll pay a lot of money for that illusion. That's what we do. But there's actually no difference between one illusion and another. They are not good or bad in themselves. Although some illusions seem more pleasant than others, they all hinder us because we either attach or avert.
They all what?
Hinder.
A hinder.
Yeah, thanks for asking. They all hinder us. The illusion of suffering is our own idea. Even our suffering, just our own idea. We have produced it and we can do away with it. So there you are on the second part of the Buddha. End of suffering. We've produced it, so we can do away with it. Isn't that hopeful? I love that. Okay, now, I think we'll press on for about 15 minutes if people are okay, and then take a little break. If you need a break, just wander and get it quietly. Okay, so now, this particular text. Oh, let me talk about your little packet here, just to orient us. So, on page 1, I listed the 3 wisdoms, a very basic description. Why I list those is this is all the teaching in Tibetan Buddhism, and maybe other Buddhisms, but other Buddhisms, other lineages, but I don't know them. So I just talk about the one I know a little bit. The 3 wisdoms are how we approach the path, okay? And these are good to memorize. Michael talks about them quite often. We talk about them. They'll be studied. You have to study. It doesn't matter if you're a Kagyu Milarepa type person. You can't just go up to the cave and not have read anything, heard anything. Milarepa didn't do that. He had tons of teachings from Marpa before he went to the cave and wore his little cotton thing and ate nettles till he turned green, you know, and achieved full awakening. But, you know, we can get on this kind of trip like, I don't really need all this. I've got Buddha nature in here. I'll figure it out.
I'm already enlightened anyway. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. That's good. I'll figure it out. Yeah. Well, if you could do that, you'd be there already. Okay, so probably be careful about that. So we just need to hear teachings, read teachings, learn about teaching. Pretty simple. That's the first one, study. Second is contemplate. We're going to do quite a bit about that today. Think about the teaching. We'll take each verse and we'll spend 3 different ways thinking about them. Investigate it on and off the cushion. Suffering of change. Is that right? That one. When I have a very pleasant experience, it feels so good. I don't know if suffering of change is right. Maybe it doesn't apply to me. And so you look at that, you know. When I eat ice cream, it just is so good. My one teacher said, think about, where's the pleasure in this? So you try and find it. Is it in the object when it goes in your mouth? Is it the taste? Oh, it's already fading. The second bite's not as good. Third bite. Well, that first bite was so great. How come the third one's not just like the first one? And you just keep working with it and you start experiencing it. Okay, I get it. I see it, you know. First time I drive my new car, sunny day, gorgeous, showing off to my best friend. So great. Next day, I just have to go to work. I forgot it's new. I don't care. I'm late. You've already forgotten, you know. So where's the pleasure? Is it in that thing? Is it in your mind? Is it somewhere in between? You know? Okay, so you contemplate about it. Does it resonate with my experience? How can I use this to enrich my practice in this moment? Someone I'm angry at, they're going to die too. That can enrich my experience right there. 2 thoughts. I don't like them, they're going to die too. Right there. That's an enrichment. Doesn't have to be complicated. This is also sometimes called analytical meditation. Boy, writing this was hard to make it short because there's these synonyms about contemplating and analysis and insight that are a little different in different traditions, and we're not going to get real precise about it, but just know that. Just know that. When someone says, I do insight meditation, you might want to ask, what does that mean? Because it may not be the kind of insight meditation Kagyus do, different from Gelugpa, even within Tibetan, much less you get to Zen and Theravada. You're going to have but it's nice to learn. You don't have to have them all the same. You just say, what does that mean for you? And then you go, oh, that's interesting, you know. So you contemplate. Thirdly, you meditate. And I've just quickly listed 2. Calm, abiding meditation, shine. That's the concentration type. You're going to try to focus on an object. Notice when you're off it and return. And that's, there's another kind of meditation here that we're not going to talk about, but I'll just say the word, calm abiding with no object. Don't worry about it. If you know how to do it, you probably got taught by a teacher. And probably shouldn't do it without that. And the second kind of meditation is called insight meditation, Latang. Some people also call this analytical. That's where it gets dicey. But basically in insight, you do the calm abiding, rest in that calm mind, get calm enough to try to investigate something. As soon as you launch the investigation, the mind wavers a lot more. So, but as you keep doing it, you can hold the calm. I can't do this, so I'm just telling you something. Hold the calm till you can launch an investigation, let's say, into the nature of awareness. Then there'll be this shaking of the mind, and all of a sudden you're thinking all over the place. You come back to calm abiding, okay? But that penetration, that who's doing this? What is this? What's a thought? What's going on here? Very quick, come back. That's the Latang. Now, the goal is to eventually get your calm abiding and your insight non-dual. Non-dual, okay? And then you can rest in that and pierce through what is awareness, clarity. Well, you will be it. You know? I'm sure Bill has a lot more to say about this, but I'm not going to let him right there. No? Okay. Because he's more experienced by far in describing this. And I'm just borrowing things. Okay, next on the sheet, the 8 worldly concerns. We'll run into that. But it's always good. This is another short thing to memorize. There's 8. They come in 4 pairs. This is what we habitually waste our precious lives pursuing. At least I do. We think they lead to happiness, but they only lead to these 3 different kinds of suffering. They're described in pairs. One we pursue, we avoid the other. The costs are tremendous of doing this because we get no freedom and we keep spinning the wheel of suffering. So what are they? My pleasure, my pain. I spend a whole lot of time on this in the morning, taking my vitamins, making sure I get my breakfast. These aren't bad at all. None of them are bad. But you just watch, wow, how long did that take? My exercise, my shower, my fixing my hair and picking my clothes, Nothing bad, but you just see, wow, I spent a lot more time on that than I did on the cushion this morning. Now, which one's going to help me when I die? All that body gone. The consciousness I worked on the cushion, 10 minutes. Okay? Then my gain, my loss. No explanation needed. It can be any kind of gain. You know, it can be your personal advantage in a conversation. I want to show what I know. It can be physical. You know, I'm going to make sure I get the biggest piece of cake. It can be anything. My good reputation, my bad reputation. These last two we are really immersed in. I really want you to think well about me. And I want you to leave here and tell everybody how great that teaching by Zopa was, okay? I mean, that's really important. It's so important. It's more important than anything. Okay, you get it, you know. And if I think that this is going to be miserable, and I worry about bad reputation, you go out and you'll say, man, she really screwed up the fourth of the 8 verses. She didn't even know what that was. And then you talk about it to someone. That's so bad. But my teacher said one time, I got really caught up in a reputation thing, and she said, what's a reputation? She's always deconstructing everything. This is the problem. This is the solution. And I thought, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's people's opinion. And she said, yeah, how stable are those? They love you one minute, they don't like you the next. They don't care because they're thinking about their own reputation, you know? And it was like, oh my God, it's a shifting set of opinions that just go all over, here, then, gone. And I'm spending all this time being miserable trying to build a good one. Better to just do what you know is right with your values, and some people will like you, some people will not like you, and most people won't care. They won't care because they're doing their own thing. So, same of praise. You know, we love praise, and we really hate it when someone criticizes or blames us. The I comes forth immediately to defend, argue, etc. So this is mostly what we spend our time on, these ephemeral things we have no control over, but we keep trying to control, okay? I'm not going to go through these conceptual definitions of ultimate nature because we already touched on that, but these are really good to look at if you want to get a quick definition of emptiness, intrinsic nature, than something that Kempo Sultram Gyatso says, okay? And we'll come back to those when we hit verse 8. Remind me to do that, okay? When we hit verse 8, which is all about the illusion. Okay, are we doing good? Are we awake and alive? And any puzzlement, scritchy, scratchy going on? Okay. So, 2 things that I need to do because it's what my teachers did when they taught me. You talk about the author of the text. So the author of these 8 verses, Langri-Tampa, was a geshe, meaning the quickest way to think of a geshe is someone who gets a doctorate in Buddhist studies, but they take 20 years to get their doctorate in a monastery generally, and with intense study and practice, so it far outshines our doctorates. Langri-Tampa was such a being. Born in 1054 and died in 1123. He's a hugely important figure in the lineage of the Kadampa masters. They were the lineage that brought the mind training to us, practice that pulled it together. And he's a huge figure in there. He's also a very huge one in the Gelug school. He was born in central Tibet, and in page 99, I found a cool little thing about him. It's really nice. Because the thing about Langri-Tampa, you can tell from the 8 verses, but, you know, a geshe, okay, you get a doctorate, it's all about intellect. But he was a super practitioner. I mean, you can't write something like the 8 verses. Can you imagine writing the 8 verses? I mean, as we go through them, imagine what kind of being this one had to be to write these, you know. So he was a magnificent practitioner. So Patro Rinpoche's teacher said about him, the sign of meditation having truly taken root in you is to feel like Geshe Langri Tangpa. One day, one of his close attendants told him, quote, the others call you Langri Tangpa, gloomy face. And he said, how could my face be bright and cheery? I think about all the sufferings in the three worlds of samsara. It's pretty important. I mean, he's totally embedded in the suffering, but you know from the 8 verses, he's totally embedded in the end of suffering too. So then it says, it is said of him that he smiled one time in his whole life. And I thought this story was so funny. It's so Tibetan. They'll tell these stories and you're just like, okay. He only smiled once. He smiled when he saw a mouse trying to move a turquoise that was on his mandala plate. You know the mandala plate you put jewels on and rice on. And he saw this mouse moving it. But the mouse couldn't lift the jewel on its own. So it called out, sick, sick. And another mouse came along too. And one mouse pushed the turquoise and the other pulled. And that made Langri Tangpa laugh. Okay, I love that. I don't know why, just because it's so human. But deeply embedded in the realization of suffering and the end of it. And deeply embedded in almost one of the more important things to say about this is the source of suffering. So the source, we say, is the mind. Buddha said that. Mind precedes everything. What the mind training points at, though, is within the mind, within our mind, a certain type of ignorance. And the deepest part of that ignorance is that we think there's a separate, self-sufficient self. Self-other, self-other. And many texts will say, especially Zen ones who make it very precise and concise, suffering comes from self-other. As soon as you have an idea, there's a self and other. You've lost the view of interdependence, which is reality. Reality is deep interdependence. No self, no other. But we don't go around like that. We have quite a stubborn pattern. It's stubborn pattern. It's very intentionally cultivated pattern of there is a separate self and there's the other, and all suffering comes from that. So the mind trainings go straight at that. Straight at, okay, you think you got a self? Now we're going to slice and dice, okay? And we're going to turn it on its head, and we're going to put other ahead of us, and we're going to humiliate this self that doesn't exist rather than exalting it. We exalt it all day. That's a strong word, but we'll put it first. Even when we're nice, we're so nice. Buddhists are so nice. And that niceness hides that truth, you know. So it's really set up to do that. Okay, one other thing. Oh, teachers always did this, so I tried to do it. What I rely on in sharing this teaching, so you'll know I'm not making all of it up. I'm making some up, but I try and stay. I received teachings along with thousands of others in 2009 from His Holiness the Dalai. Okay, just a minute. get surprised with. And also on the 8 verses, and also from Venerable Tipton Children, who's my root guru, one of them. And she teaches on these 8 verses constantly. I don't think there's a time that she doesn't, because she lives them at her monastery. If you're there, you live them or you get sliced and diced in the most beautiful way. And also I watched on video teachings by the Karmapa. And I'm sorry I didn't write down. I can send them to anybody who emails me. They're 3 hours of teachings on these verses. And then I just spent time contemplating and meditating. Okay, I think right before our break, how about we just read through the 8 together with no pause and no particular anything, okay? And we're gonna, there's 2 translations here.
Which one?
Yeah, I gave 2 translations. There are so many. I ran into translation after translation. And I forgot another thing. I relied on Bill and I had a good meeting about this. And we looked at the difference in some of these translations. And it was fascinating how different the emphasis can be. But let's read the first one. The last page. I want to read the one I'm the most familiar with. The very last page of the chapter. Okay. Translated by Lama Zopa Rinpoche in a Pearl of Wisdom prayer book that we use at the Abbey. So let's just read them through, okay? With the thought
of attaining awakening through the welfare of all beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will constantly practice holding them dear. Whenever I am with others, I will practice seeing myself as the lowest of all, and from the very depths of my heart, I will respectfully hold others as supreme. In all actions, I will examine my mind, and the moment a disturbing attitude arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly confront and avert it. Whenever I meet a person of bad nature who is overwhelmed by negative energy and intense suffering, I will hold such a rare one dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. When others out of jealousy mistreat me with abuse, slander, and so on, I will practice accepting defeat and offering the victory to them. When someone I have benefited and in whom I have placed great trust hurts me very badly, I will practice seeing that person as my supreme teacher. In short, I will offer directly and indirectly every benefit and happiness to all beings, my mothers. I will practice in secret, taking upon myself all their harmful actions and sufferings, without these practices being defiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory. I will practice without grasping to release all beings from the bondage of the disturbing, unsubdued mind and karma.
Okay, let's take a tea break of about 15 minutes. And I would suggest that we keep what's called noble silence. Make this more a day where you're really carrying these and not so much getting in conversations about the outside world. So noble silence is if you need to talk because you don't know where something is, do that. But or you absolutely have to talk with someone about something, then just step aside. Okay? All right? And I'll ring a gong to bring you back. Bathrooms upstairs, main floor, and one in the basement. Enjoy tea.